They threw her out at midnight with $5 in her purse. She was 70 years old. At 11:47 on a Tuesday night in November, Eleanor Whitmore, widow, retired schoolteacher, mother of 2 grown children who never called, was set down on the curb outside Sunset Pines assisted living with 1 small suitcase and exactly 5 crumpled dollar bills. The night nurse cried. The director did not. "Your son hasn't paid in 4 months. We have a policy." Eleanor did not argue. She did not beg. She had taught 3rd grade for 42 years, and she had learned long ago that some doors don't open by pleading. She buttoned her thin grey coat. She walked 11 blocks to the Cleveland Greyhound station. She sat down at 3:14 in the morning and unfolded the $5 bill in her palm, the way a person stares at the last piece of bread in the house. 70 years old, $5, nowhere to go, but somewhere, 2,000 miles away in a town she'd never visited. An old diner had been waiting for her. A man she taught to read in 1978 had spent the last 40 years preparing it for the moment she would walk through the door. She just didn't know it yet. If you've ever wondered whether the small kindnesses you give to strangers actually matter, stay with me. Because what happens to Eleanor in the next 72 hours is going to answer that question forever. $5. That was everything Eleanor Whitmore had to her name on the night they put her out on the street. She was 70 years old. At 11:47 on a Tuesday night in November, the cold hit her face the moment the glass doors of Sunset Pines, assisted living, slid shut behind her. A small suitcase, her late husband Harold's wedding ring on a chain around her neck, 5 crumpled dollar bills folded inside a worn leather purse that had outlived 2 presidents. That was all. The night nurse, a young woman named Rosa with kind brown eyes, had cried while handing over the discharge papers. The director had not. "Your son hasn't paid in 4 months, Mrs. Whitmore. We have a policy." That was what he said. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "Is there anywhere we can take you?" Just, "We have a policy." As if a policy were a living thing. As if it could feel the wind off Lake Erie in November. Eleanor did not argue. She did not beg. She had taught 3rd grade for 42 years in a brick schoolhouse on the west side of Cleveland, and she'd learned long ago that there are some doors you cannot keep open by pleading. Some doors only open from the other side. Some doors, when they close, are closed. So she buttoned her thin grey coat. The buttons did not match anymore. One had fallen off in 2019, and she had replaced it with a black one because the matching one cost $3 she did not want to spend. She picked up her suitcase. Her hands shook, from the cold, and from something deeper than the cold. She walked 11 blocks, in November, past the bakery that had once been a record store, past the Catholic church where Harold's funeral had been held 12 years ago, past the corner where her granddaughter Ava had once tripped over a curb at age 4, and Eleanor had carried her home on her hip while Ava cried into her neck. That granddaughter was 16 now. Eleanor had not seen her in 3 years. The Greyhound station rose out of the dark like a tired animal. Fluorescent lights, the smell of disinfectant and old coffee, a vending machine humming in the corner. Eleanor sat down on a hard plastic bench at 3:14 in the morning. She unfolded the $5 bill in her palm and she stared at it, the way a person stares at the last piece of bread in the house. A wet cough. Eleanor looked up. A woman sat across from her on the opposite bench. 68, maybe 69. White hair pulled back in a loose bun. A face like a closed envelope. A canvas bag at her feet, packed too neatly. Like she had been preparing for this for a long time and just hadn't told anyone. Eleanor knew her. "Maggie." The woman lifted her head. Margaret Doyle, room 14, 2 doors down from Eleanor's at Sunset Pines. They had played gin rummy together every Wednesday afternoon for 2.5 years. "Eleanor," that was all Maggie said, just the name, as if speaking it took the last of her strength. Eleanor stood up. Her hip hurt. It had hurt since 2018. She crossed the floor and sat down beside her. "You too?" Maggie nodded once. "My daughter," she said. "Phoenix. She stopped sending checks in August." "Mine was Theo." "Lawyer?" "Yes." "Same." The 2 old women sat side by side and watched a janitor mop the floor near the bathrooms. Neither of them cried. After a long while, Maggie reached into her canvas bag and pulled out a small black case. She opened it. Inside were 3 glass vials and a single insulin pen. "How many doses?" Eleanor asked. Maybe 4, 5 if I stretch. And then? Maggie shrugged. The shrug of a woman who had stopped letting herself imagine, and then, I was a nurse for 30 years, she said. I always thought I'd die in a hospital, with my hand in my daughter's. Funny how things turn out. It is not funny. No, Maggie agreed. It is not. The library kiosk in the corner of the bus station had a free public computer. 20 minutes per session. A handwritten sign taped to the monitor said, "Please be respectful of others. The library does not provide tech support after midnight." Eleanor had not used a computer in 6 years, but she remembered. She had been the one in her family who learned email first, back in 1998. Back when Harold was still alive and Theo was still in law school, and her daughter Vivian was still calling on Sundays. She typed slowly. Cheap apartments, Cleveland. $3,000 deposit. Rooms for rent. Cleveland. $1,100 a month plus utilities. Credit check required. References required. Eleanor had no credit. Eleanor had no references that would speak for her now. Eleanor had $5. She sat back in the plastic chair. Her hip ached. The clock above the ticket counter said 4:02 in the morning. She almost gave up. Almost. But then she remembered something. A long time ago, when Harold was still driving long haul, he used to send her postcards from the road. Little squares of cheap cardboard from gas stations and roadside diners and motels with broken neon signs. He wrote on every one of them. Always the same kind of thing. Thinking of you, Elle. Stopped at a little diner today. Best apple pie I ever ate. Owner waved at me like I was somebody. She had kept every postcard. 43 years of them. When Harold died, Theo had told her to throw them out. Mom. They're just postcards. She had not thrown them out. They were in a shoebox under her bed at Sunset Pines, which meant they were probably in a dumpster behind Sunset Pines now. But she remembered the names. Briarwood, Montana, Ridgeway Diner, a small place, off the old highway. Harold had stopped there in 1986 and again in 1991. He had said the owner was a man named Walter, who served coffee like it mattered. Eleanor leaned forward. She typed slowly. Briarwood, Montana property auction. The county listing came up. She scrolled. Foreclosed homes, seized vehicles, a pickup truck from 2003, a trailer with no title, and then, buried near the bottom of the page, abandoned roadside diner, Briarwood, Montana, starting bid, $5. Sold as is. No inspection available. Buyer must claim keys in person. Property includes all contents. Eleanor read it again, and again, a third time, $5. The exact amount in her purse. The exact amount. She clicked the link. A photograph loaded slowly. A small white building with a chrome trim along the roof. A neon sign tilted at an angle. The kind of place a man like Harold would have stopped for apple pie. Ridgeway Diner. Her hands started to shake. She did not believe in signs. She had taught third graders for 42 years. She believed in homework. She believed in showing up. She did not believe in signs. Except for this. She placed her bid. The website asked her to confirm. Are you sure? This bid is binding. Eleanor looked over at Maggie. Maggie was watching her. What is it? A diner, Eleanor said. In Montana. How much? $5. Maggie was quiet for a long moment. Then, Eleanor, are you out of your mind? Probably. 2,000 miles? At least. In November? Yes. With me? Eleanor had not planned to ask. The words came out before she could think them through. But the moment they were spoken, she knew they were the truest thing she'd said in a year. With you. Maggie blinked. Once. Twice. Then she reached into her canvas bag and pulled out a folded $20 bill. The kind that had clearly been hidden for an emergency. For the bus tickets, she said. Don't argue. I won't ride this thing alone. Ellen did not argue. She clicked confirm. The screen changed. Congratulations. You are the winning bidder. Property number 7742, Ridgeway Diner. Final bid, $5. Please claim keys at Briarwood County Clerk's office within 14 days. Eleanor stared at the screen. 2 old women in a Greyhound station at 4 in the morning. 1 $5 bill, gone. 1 winning bid, 1 diner, 2,000 miles away. The bus left Cleveland at 5:47 in the morning. The driver did not look at them when they boarded. The other passengers did not look at them when they sat down. Two old women with one suitcase and one canvas bag were not the kind of people anyone looked at on a greyhound at dawn. That was fine. Eleanor had been invisible for years. She knew the shape of it. The way the world's eyes slid past her at grocery stores and bank counters and church potlucks, where the younger women now ran the kitchen. 3 days, 3 changes of bus. Cleveland to Chicago, Chicago to Minneapolis, Minneapolis to Billings, Montana, where they would catch a small county shuttle to a town of 1,400 people. 3 days of sleeping, sitting up. 3 days of vending machine pretzels. 3 days of bathroom sinks for water. 3 days of Maggie checking her blood sugar with shaking hands and pretending the numbers were better than they were. Somewhere in Iowa, Maggie spoke for the first time in hours. "You ever been to Montana, Eleanor?" "No, me either." "Harold drove through it. Truck driver. Long haul, 41 years. Good man?" Eleanor closed her eyes. She could see Harold standing at the kitchen sink in his union shirt, washing dishes she had told him to leave alone. She could see him picking Theo up off the floor when Theo was 3 and laughing at something on the television. She could see him, the last morning, kissing her forehead before he went to mow the lawn and never came back inside. "The best one," she said. Maggie nodded slowly, like a woman who had once known a good man too. Then she turned her face to the window and did not speak again until Wyoming. Briarwood, Montana, in late November, looked like a town that time had forgotten to take with it when it left. Main Street was 4 blocks long, a hardware store with a hand-painted sign, a feed store with bags of grain in the window, a small diner with red booths visible through frosted glass, a general store with a porch that sagged on one side, a post office, a county clerk's office, population 1,400. Eleanor and Maggie stepped down from the county shuttle at 1:42 in the afternoon. The wind hit them like a slap. Sharp. Dry. Smelling of pine and wood smoke and coming snow. They walked toward the courthouse. Every person on the sidewalk stopped to look at them. 2 old women with one suitcase and one canvas bag standing in the middle of Main Street. The county clerk's office was warm inside. A woman behind the counter was eating an apple. She had silver hair pulled back tight, reading glasses on a chain, a name tag that said, Doris Hatfield, County Clerk. She looked up. Her chewing slowed. "Can I help you, ladies?" Eleanor stepped forward. She placed her empty hands on the counter as if her empty hands were the only credentials she had left. "I'm here to claim keys." "Which property?" "The Ridgeway diner." Doris stopped chewing entirely. She put down the apple. She removed her reading glasses. She stared at Eleanor for a long time. "You're the one who bid $5. "Yes." "Honey," Doris said softly, "what is your name?" "Eleanor Whitmore." Doris went very still. She stared at Eleanor across the counter as if she were trying to remember something, as if the name had rung a bell somewhere deep in the building of her memory. She turned around without speaking. She walked to a back room. Eleanor and Maggie waited in the silence. The clock on the wall ticked. Outside, the first snowflakes of the season had begun to fall. When Doris came back, she was carrying a manila envelope, but she did not hand it over. She held it pressed against her chest, the way a person holds a thing they are not yet sure they should give away. "How old are you, Mrs. Whitmore?" 70. "And your friend?" Maggie answered for herself. 68. "Do you have anywhere else to go? Family? Anyone we should call?" "No." Doris's eyes filled with water. She did not wipe them. "Mrs. Whitmore, I have been the county clerk in this town for 27 years. I knew Walter Brennan. He was my friend. He would come into this office every 6 months and ask me one question. Always the same question." "What question?" "He would ask if anyone had filed a missing persons inquiry under the name Eleanor." Eleanor's throat closed. "He spelled it for me every time," Doris continued. "Eleanor. He said just in case she's looking for me. He said I want to know the day she comes through that door." Eleanor could not speak. Maggie reached out and took her hand. Doris finally handed over the envelope. Inside, 2 brass keys on a simple metal ring, a folded property deed, and a small note in handwriting that was clearly not Doris's, clearly older, clearly a man's, the note said. "If you're reading this, then somehow you found your way home. Welcome. The lights still work. The pipes still run. The coffee in the back cupboard is 15 years old. Please throw it out and make a new pot. W." Eleanor's hand began to shake so badly she could not hold the note still. Doris reached into her drawer and took out a brown paper bag, a sandwich, an apple, a small foil-wrapped piece of cake. She slid it across the counter. "From my lunch," she said. "It's 4 miles out there on the old highway. You'll be hungry." "Doris," Eleanor whispered. "Who was Walter Brennan?" Doris looked at her for a long, long moment, the kind of look that contained whole years. "That, Mrs. Whitmore, is a story you're going to have to walk into." They walked. 4 miles east of Briarwood, on a road that curved through frozen farmland and skeletal forest. The snow fell heavier now. Their feet crunched through a thin white layer that was already beginning to thicken. Eleanor's hips screamed. Maggie's breathing came shallow, but neither woman stopped. They had not come this far to stop. The road dipped, then rose, then bent around a stand of pines. And there, in a gravel parking lot more weeds than gravel, stood the diner, smaller than Eleanor had imagined. 1 story, rectangular, large windows across the front, a chrome roofline that caught what little afternoon light the snow let through. The white paint was peeling. The roof sagged slightly in the middle. 1 window was boarded up, but the foundation was straight, the walls were straight, and the neon sign above the door, dark and rusted and tilted at an angle, still bore its name. Ridgeway Diner, open 24 hours. A piece of weathered plywood had been nailed over the 24 hours. Someone long ago had painted the word closed on the wood. Time had faded the paint to a ghost. Eleanor stood in the gravel. She did not move for a long time. Maggie waited beside her. "Eleanor," Maggie said finally, "it's real. I see it. You bought this, with $5. I see it. Eleanor, are you going to open the door?" Eleanor took the brass keys out of her purse. Her fingers were so cold she could barely close them around the metal. She walked across the parking lot. She climbed the 2 steps to the front door. The lock was stiff. She had to use both hands, but it turned. The door swung open with a long, slow creak that sounded like a building exhaling for the first time in 15 years. The smell hit them first. Dust. Old grease. Wood that had been baked in summer suns and frozen in Montana winters for a decade and a half. And underneath that, something else. Something faint, sweet, almost like a memory of cinnamon. Eleanor stepped inside. The afternoon light slanted through dirty windows in long, golden shafts. Dust hung in the air like snow that had forgotten gravity. Red vinyl booths lined the walls. A long chrome counter stretched the length of the room. Stools mounted to the floor, a pass-through window into the kitchen, coffee cups stacked upside down by the register, salt and pepper shakers standing at attention on every table, a time capsule. Maggie walked slowly down the centre aisle, her canvas bag still over her shoulder, her eyes wide. "Eleanor," she whispered, "nothing has been touched." "No. It's like he just stepped out for a smoke." Eleanor walked behind the counter. She ran her fingers along the chrome. Dust came up in a soft grey ribbon. She opened a cabinet. Stacks of plates wrapped in newspaper. Newspapers from 2009. Cups and saucers carefully packed away. Whoever had closed this place had not abandoned it. He had preserved it. He had been preparing it. "Eleanor?" Maggie's voice from across the room. "Look." Eleanor walked over. Maggie was standing at the far end of the counter. She was pointing at a wooden frame on the wall above the cash register. A black and white photograph. Faded. The corners curled. A man stood in front of the diner, one hand resting on the hood of a vintage pickup truck. He was young in the photo, late 20s, maybe 30. A serious expression that did not quite hide a quiet pride. Beneath the photo, a small brass plate. Walter Brennan, 1978. Opening day. Eleanor stopped breathing. She stepped closer. She lifted her reading glasses from the chain around her neck, the chain Harold had given her on their 30th anniversary. She put the glasses on with shaking hands. She looked. She looked. She looked. That face. That face. She would have known it in the dark. She would have known it after 100 years. The eyes. The mouth that had once pressed itself thin to keep from crying when the other children laughed. The small scar above the left eyebrow from a fall on the playground in October of 1962. Walter Brennan. Walter. Little Walter. Eleanor sat down on the nearest stool, hard. Her knee buckled. The brass keys fell out of her hand and clattered onto the chrome counter. The boy who could not read. The boy whose father had left in the spring of 1961 and whose mother had drunk herself into a stupor every night by 4 p.m. the boy who had come to school with bruises he would not explain and lunch boxes that were always empty. Eleanor had taken him into her room in September of 1962, her first year of teaching, when she was 22 years old and barely older than the children's older siblings. She had stayed every Tuesday after school, from 3:15 to 4:30, for 2 years. She had taught him to read with a beat-up copy of The Old Man and the Sea she had bought at a used bookstore for 60 cents. She had bought him a winter coat in November of 1963 and pretended it was an extra one her own little brother had outgrown. She had written him a letter in June of 1964, the day he came to her classroom to say his mother was moving them to a cousin's house in another state. The letter had said, "Walter, you're smarter than you know. The world is bigger than this town. Go and find it. You will be all right. Mrs. Whitmore." She had given him the book. She had hugged him goodbye. She had never seen him again. Until now. Now. In a diner 2,000 miles from Cleveland. A diner she had bought for $5. A diner he had built and named and waited in. A diner he had asked the county clerk about. "Just in case she's looking for me." Eleanor put both her hands flat on the counter and bent her head and made a sound she had not made since the morning Harold did not come back inside from the lawn. A small broken sound. A sound like a thing finally allowed to break. Maggie did not move. Maggie did not speak. Maggie just walked over and put one hand very gently on Eleanor's shoulder, and the two old women stood there in the gold light of a forgotten diner in a town the world had stopped looking at, while the snow fell quiet against the windows. It took an hour for Eleanor to be able to stand again. The afternoon was fading into a long blue Montana dusk by the time she could move. Maggie had busied herself wiping the counter with a clean cloth she had found in a drawer. Practical Maggie, sensible Maggie, a nurse to her bones, even now, even here, with no patient but the building itself. "Eleanor, we need to think about tonight. I know. It's going to drop below 0. I know. The power in this place, does it work?" Eleanor flipped the switch by the door. A row of bulbs hummed to life along the chrome ceiling. The diner glowed. Maggie laughed. A small, tired, disbelieving laugh. He kept the lights paid. The note said he did. For 15 years. Apparently. They explored slowly. The kitchen was vast. A big steel griddle, 2 industrial fryers, a walk-in refrigerator humming softly because it too was apparently still on. Eleanor opened the door. Inside, neatly stacked, were boxes of dry goods, sealed in plastic, dated. Dated October 2024, last month. Someone had been bringing supplies. Someone in Briarwood had been keeping this place ready. Maggie's eyes met hers. "Eleanor, he died 2 years ago. Doris told you so." "Yes." "Then who is restocking his refrigerator?" Eleanor had no answer. They kept exploring. They found a small living quarters at the back of the kitchen. A cot, a clean bedspread, a space heater, a reading lamp, a bookshelf. On the bookshelf were 47 books. Eleanor knew without looking which one was on the top shelf. She walked to it. She lifted it down. A copy of The Old Man and the Sea. She opened the front cover, in her own handwriting, 60 years old. To Walter, from Mrs. Whitmore. "Be brave. The world is bigger than this town. Go find it." The book had been opened so many times the spine had been reglued. The pages were soft from reading. A piece of paper was folded inside. Older paper. Yellowed. She unfolded it. The letter she had written him, the day he left her classroom. He had kept it. He had kept it for 60 years. Eleanor sat down on the edge of the cot and held the book against her chest the way a woman holds something so precious she cannot name it. She did not cry this time. She had cried her share for one afternoon. Instead, very quietly, she said, "Walter, I am so sorry I didn't come sooner." The diner did not answer. The diner only held the silence around her, the way a building can hold a silence when it has been waiting a long time for someone to walk in and break it. It was Maggie who found the trapdoor. She was looking for a broom. She thought she had seen a closet behind the largest refrigerator, the big one against the back wall, the one that did not seem to be plugged in. She had asked Eleanor to help her push it. The two old women, hip and shoulder, leaned into the steel. It moved, slowly, reluctantly, with the screech of a thing that had not been moved in years. Behind it, the floor was different. The rest of the kitchen was covered in worn commercial tile. But here, in this corner, The tile was newer, cleaner, carefully laid, and in the centre of that newer tile was a metal handle, set flush into the floor. Eleanor and Maggie looked at each other. "Eleanor, I see it. That's a trapdoor. I see it. In a diner. I see it, Maggie." A long pause. Maggie said, more quietly, "Are we going to open it?" Eleanor knelt down. Her hip protested. She gripped the metal handle. It was cold, heavy. She pulled. Nothing happened. She adjusted her grip. She braced her good knee. She pulled again, harder, with the strength of a woman who had once carried 2 children and a husband and a classroom and a marriage and a household on these same arms. There was a click, then a slow hydraulic whoosh. The trapdoor rose. A staircase descended into a darkness that smelled of cold concrete and something else. Something clean. Like a room that had been sealed away from the world's slow rot. Eleanor turned on the small flashlight on the keychain Doris had given her with the keys. She started down the stairs. Maggie, against every nurse's instinct, did not stop her. Maggie followed. The stairs went down farther than they should have. A full flight. Then a small landing. Then another short flight. The flashlight beam swept a wall. Concrete. Reinforced. Industrial. Eleanor reached the bottom. She felt for a switch on the wall. Her hand found one. She flipped it. A row of fluorescent lights set into the ceiling blinked once, then twice, then came on, full and bright and humming. Eleanor saw what was beneath the diner. Maggie saw it. Neither woman spoke for a long, long time, because the room beneath the Ridgeway diner was not a basement. It was a bunker. Concrete walls, 8-foot ceilings, thick supporting pillars at regular intervals, metal shelving units stretching from floor to ceiling along every wall, canned goods, hundreds of them, labelled, dried food in vacuum-sealed bags, dated, cases of bottled water, medical supplies still sealed, sleeping bags, wool blankets, portable stoves, fuel. A generator the size of a small car sitting in its own alcove, ventilated through pipes that disappeared into the ceiling, a hand-crank radio, flashlights, batteries, tools. Walter Brennan had built a fortress under his diner. He had spent 40 years filling it. In the far corner against a wall sat a metal desk, a reading lamp, a stack of papers, and a leather journal, thick, worn soft at the edges. Eleanor walked toward it. She picked up the journal, she opened it. The handwriting was clear, careful, the writing of a man who had learned penmanship the hard way, and had been proud of it for the rest of his life. The first line read, "If you're reading this, then somehow, by some grace I do not deserve, the right person has finally walked through my door." Eleanor sat down hard in the desk chair. She read, "I do not know who you are. I do not know how you came to own this place, but I have spent 40 years filling this room, and 40 years filling this diner, with everything I could give. Take what you need, use it well. There are people in this town who will help you. There is a man named Emmett. There is a woman named Opal. There is a sheriff named Declan. They are good people. I have only one regret in my life. I never thanked the person who taught me I was worth saving. I tried to find her. I came close. I lost my nerve. I am old now, and there is not much time." Eleanor closed the journal. She held it against her chest. She did not cry. She just held the book that contained the shape of her own life and rocked, very gently, the way a mother rocks a sleeping child. Outside, 4 miles away in the town of Briarwood, the first real snow of the season had begun to fall in earnest, and somewhere on a road that wound through the frozen farmland, the headlights of a single car were turning slowly off the highway and pointing themselves toward the Ridgeway diner. Coming, in the dark, toward 2 old women who did not yet know they were not alone. The headlights came down the gravel road at exactly 6:42 the next morning. Eleanor was upstairs by then, in the diner's kitchen, trying to make coffee on a stove she did not yet trust. Maggie was scrubbing dust from the counter with a rag and a bottle of vinegar she had found in a cupboard. Neither woman had slept. Eleanor heard the engine first. A pickup truck. Old. The kind that wheezed a little before it shut off. Eleanor's hand stilled on the coffee pot. The truck door slammed. Footsteps on the gravel. A pause. A knock. Slow. Polite. The knock of a man who had knocked on this door 100 times before. Eleanor walked to the front of the diner. Maggie followed 2 steps behind her, holding a kitchen knife she had picked up without thinking. Eleanor unlocked the door. She opened it. A man stood on the porch, 76 years old, tall, thin, white hair sticking out from beneath a wool cap, eyes the colour of faded blue denim, overalls over a flannel shirt, boots caked with frost, a small grocery bag in his right hand. He looked at Eleanor for a long moment without speaking. His mouth opened, it closed, it opened again. "Lord have mercy," he whispered. "Excuse me?" "You're her." Eleanor blinked. "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" "No, ma'am. But Walter knew you, and I knew Walter. So in a way I have known you for 60 years. The grocery bag slipped from his hand. A loaf of bread fell onto the welcome mat. Eggs, a jar of homemade jam. The man took off his cap and held it against his chest the way a man removes his hat in church. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, "my name is Emmett Hollis. I run the general store in town. I was Walter Brennan's friend for 46 years, and I have been bringing groceries to this empty diner once every 2 weeks since the day he died, just in case." Maggie set the kitchen knife down on the counter. Eleanor reached for the doorframe with one hand because her knees had gone soft. In case of what? In case you came. Emmett would not come inside until Eleanor told him to come inside. He stood on the porch with his cap in his hands and his white head bowed, like a man who had walked a long way to a place he was afraid he would not be welcome. So Eleanor said, "Please, come in." Emmett came inside. He sat in the third booth from the door. He told them everything. He told them how Walter had bought this land in the spring of 1978, with money he had saved from 12 years of military service in the Army Corps of Engineers. How he had built the diner with his own hands and the help of 3 local men. How he had named it the Ridgeway Diner because there was a street called Ridgeway in Cleveland, and on that street there was a school, and in that school in 1962, a teacher had told a boy he was worth something, and Walter said he wanted his diner to be a place where every traveller who walked through the door would feel that same thing. Eleanor put her face in her hands. She did not lift it for a long time. "He told you that," she said finally, muffled. "He told me that on the day we framed the roof. He told me that on the day we hung the neon sign." Eleanor lifted her face. "Emmett." "Yes, ma'am." "How did Walter die?" Emmett rubbed his eyes with the back of his wrist. He did not look up when he answered. "Heart attack, March of 2022. He was 74 years old. He was alone in this diner. He had locked up for the night and was sitting at the counter writing in his journal. He had a bad heart for years. He never got it looked at." "Did he?" Eleanor's voice cracked. "Did he say anything before?" Emmett finally looked up. "He left the journal open on the counter, ma'am. The last sentence he ever wrote was unfinished. It said if she ever comes, please tell her." Emmett stopped. "That was all," he said. "He never finished the sentence." Eleanor put both her hands flat on the table and she did not weep. But she did make that small broken sound again. On the 4th day, Opal Kincaid arrived. Opal Kincaid was 71 years old, 4 feet 11 inches tall, and walked into the Ridgeway Diner that morning carrying a cast-iron skillet, a binder, and the unshakable authority of a woman who had once been head waitress in this exact building for the last 7 years it was open. She did not knock. She came in through the back kitchen door with her own key. She looked at Eleanor. She looked at Maggie. She looked at the dust on the floor. She said, "Walter would be ashamed." Eleanor blinked. "I'm sorry." "Of the floor. He would be ashamed. He once fired a busboy in 1985 for letting the floor look like that for half an hour." Maggie raised an eyebrow. "Who are you?" "Opal Kincaid. I worked here from 2002 to 2009. I know every inch of this kitchen. You must be the new one. I'm Maggie, and you must be her." Opal looked at Eleanor. Her eyes filled instantly. She did not let them spill. "Mrs. Whitmore. Walter Brennan saved my life in 2003 when my husband died and I had no money and no place to put my hands. He gave me a job. He gave me a paycheck. He gave me a reason to get out of bed. Now, I am going to do for you what he did for me. I am going to put your hands on something, starting today." She slammed the binder down on the counter. "This is every recipe Walter ever made. 241 of them, including the apple pie. Where is your apron?" "I do not have an apron, Opal." Opal opened the binder, removed an apron she had clearly brought from home, threw it across the counter. "You do now." She inspected Maggie's insulin pen without asking. She tutted. "You're running low." "I am." "There is a clinic in town, a free one. Dr. Lang runs it. I cannot pay. He does not charge." "For what?" "For whatever Walter Brennan paid him not to charge for." Maggie froze. "What?" Opal did not look up from the binder. Walter set up a fund years ago. The condition was that Dr. Lang was never to turn anyone away. The fund still has money in it. You're getting your insulin tomorrow. Be at the clinic at 9. Maggie's mouth opened. It did not close for a long moment. Eleanor sat down on a stool because her legs had gone again. It was on the 9th day that the trouble came. A black Cadillac pulled into the gravel parking lot at 2:14 in the afternoon. Behind it, a sheriff's cruiser with its engine idling. Eleanor and Maggie were in the kitchen, learning how to make biscuits from Opal's binder. Eleanor walked to the front window. The Cadillac door opened. A woman climbed out. 29, maybe 30. Sharp blonde bob. A camel-coloured cashmere coat. Heels that did not belong on gravel. A face that had once been beautiful, and was still beautiful, but had set itself, over years, into the careful expression of a woman who had been disappointed too many times to risk hope. Behind her, a young man. 32 maybe. Dark hair, a nervous expression. Eleanor knew, before the woman opened her mouth, who she was. She knew because she had, the night before, found a photograph in Walter's desk drawer of a small girl holding the hand of a tall older woman, both of them standing in front of the Ridgeway diner in 1996. The older woman was Walter's ex-wife, Diane. The little girl had the same set jaw as the woman now climbing out of the Cadillac. The sheriff, Declan Moore, she would later learn, climbed out of his cruiser slowly. He did not look like a man who wanted to be here. The woman crossed the gravel. "Are you the squatter?" Eleanor blinked. "I'm sorry?" "Are you the woman who somehow purchased my father's diner for $5 while my family was sorting out his estate?" "My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I purchased this diner through a county auction. The sale was legal. The sale was a fraud. It was on the public auction site. Anyone could have bid. My family did not know about it. My father's estate had not yet been settled. The county had no business releasing it for sale. Madam, I do not know your name." "Caroline Brennan Sterling. I am Walter Brennan's daughter, and in 14 days I will have a court order that voids your purchase." Caroline had clearly expected the old woman in front of her to be afraid. The old woman in front of her was not afraid. The old woman in front of her had been a third-grade teacher for 42 years. She did not move. She did not look away. She said, "I am sorry for the loss of your father." Caroline rocked back on her heels. "What? He was a good man." "You did not know him." "I knew him." "You did not." "I knew him in 1962. I was his third-grade teacher." Caroline went silent. A long, hollow silence. Her mouth opened. Her mouth closed. Her hand rose to her chest very slowly, as if she were checking to see whether her own heart was still there. "What? What did you say your name was?" "Eleanor Whitmore." "Whitmore. Yes." "Mrs. Whitmore." "Yes." Caroline turned very slowly. She looked at the young man behind her. He stood 3 steps back, watching, his face unreadable. She turned back. She climbed the porch steps and stood directly in front of Eleanor. "My mother." "What about her?" "My mother, Diane. She used to say your name like it was a curse. She said you destroyed her marriage. She said you were the woman who took my father away from us. She said Mrs. Whitmore the way other people say cancer." Eleanor stood very still. "I never met your mother. I never met your father again after 1964. I was in Cleveland, raising 2 children, teaching school. He talked about you. I know that now. He had your letter in a frame in their bedroom, the bedroom he shared with my mother. That was unkind of him. I did not ask him to do that. He left her." "What?" "He left her in 1998. He left her over a piece of paper from a third-grade teacher he had not seen in 34 years. Do you understand what you did to my family?" Eleanor did not answer immediately. She felt Maggie come out onto the porch behind her. She felt Maggie's hand brush her elbow. When Eleanor spoke, she spoke softly. "Carolyn, I am very sorry your mother carried that pain. I did not cause it. I did not know about it. None of that was my doing. I taught a frightened little boy to read in 1962. I have done thousands of things in my life since then. I forgot him. He did not forget me. That is the whole story." Caroline's mouth trembled. She looked away. For a moment, only a moment, she looked like a child who had just been told that the monster under her bed was made of dust. Then she remembered who she was. "I have lawyers, Mrs. Whitmore. I have a court date. I have $500,000 on the line from a buyer who wants this land. My business is failing. My husband is gone. I cannot afford to lose this. I am sorry for your situation. but I will win." She turned. She walked back to her Cadillac. The young man did not follow her right away. He stood on the porch a moment longer, looking at Eleanor with something raw in his face. He took one step closer. He whispered, "Mrs. Whitmore." "Yes." "My name is Nathan Hollis. I was Walter's friend's grandson, Emmett's grandson. I'm Caroline's lawyer against my better judgment. I'm coming back, alone. Tomorrow night, after dark. There's something you need to see." Then he too walked back to the Cadillac. The next visitor came at 11:17 the following morning. Eleanor heard the engine before she saw the car. A different engine this time, smoother, more expensive. A silver Lexus pulled into the gravel. Eleanor knew that car. She knew that car the way a mother knows the back of her child's head in a crowded room. She set down the dish towel in her hands. She walked very slowly to the front window. She watched her son climb out of the Lexus. Theodore Whitmore, 47, tall, a grey cashmere overcoat, dark hair starting to thin at the temples, the same long face Harold had had. Maggie came up behind her. "Eleanor, is that—" "Yes." "Your son?" "Yes." "Eleanor, you do not have to open that door." Eleanor stood very still. She thought about that for a long time, about the door of her own home, the day Harold had not come back inside from the lawn, about the door of Sunset Pines, about this door, the new one, the one a frightened boy had built around her name in 1978. Eleanor walked to the front of the diner. She put her hand on the brass handle. She opened the door. Theo stopped on the porch step. He looked at her. She looked at him. "Mum," he said. "Theodore, can I come in?" "You may come in, but I want to be clear about something before you do." "Okay." "I am not your bank," he winced. "I am not your retirement plan, Mum, and I'm not your way out of whatever you have done." Theo's jaw tightened. She watched the moment in his face. "Mum, I'm in trouble." "I know. You don't know." "Theodore, I'm 70 years old. I have known you since the day you were born." "I know." He stepped inside. He looked around the diner, the booths, the counter, the chrome. He shook his head. "Mum, what is this place?" "This is my diner." "Mum, this is my diner, Theodore." "You bought a diner. For $5. You... Sit down. You look pale." He sat down. In the third booth. Maggie made tea. She did not bring any for him. Theo placed his briefcase on the table. He opened it. He took out a folder. He slid the folder across. "Mum." "Yes. I need you to sign these." Eleanor did not touch the folder. "What are they, Theodore?" "They are a power of attorney. There is a buyer, a company called Clear Path Energy. They are offering $500,000 for this land. I can negotiate the deal. I will set you up somewhere comfortable. You will not have to worry about anything ever again." Eleanor looked at the folder. She looked at her son, the boy she had walked the floor with at 2 a.m. when he had colic, the boy she had taught to ride a bicycle on the sidewalk in front of their house in 1981. "Theodore?" "Yes, Mom." "Did you stop paying Sunset Pines on purpose?" The silence in the diner was the worst silence Eleanor had ever heard in her life. Theo's face went pale, then red, then pale again. "Mom, did you stop paying? On purpose? So that I would be put out on the street? So that I would be desperate? So that I would sign whatever you put in front of me? Did you do that to me? Mum, you don't understand. Look at me when you answer me, Theodore Whitmore." He looked at her. She watched her son try to find a way to say no. She watched him fail. "Mom, I am in debt. Bad debt. The kind that... There are people, Mom. I have until February. I had to do something. I didn't think they would actually put you out. I thought they would call me. I thought they would..." "They did call you." "What?" "Rosa, the night nurse. 3 times. She told me when she handed me my discharge papers. She said, 'Mrs. Whitmore, I have called your son and your daughter and neither of them has answered. So do not stand in my diner and tell me you did not think.'" Theo put his face in his hands. He started to cry. Eleanor watched her son cry. For one moment, one terrible moment, every cell in her body wanted to cross the room and put her arms around him. She did not. After a long time, Theo lifted his face. "Mom, please, sign the papers." "No." "Mom, no, Theodore. Please. Theodore, listen to me." She walked to the table. She picked up the folder. She placed it back into his briefcase. She closed the briefcase. "You are going to get into your car. You're going to drive back to Chicago. You're going to face what you have done. I will not save you from it, because saving you from it now would be the greatest cruelty I have ever done you in your whole life. Do you understand? Mom, do you understand? He nodded. Once. He stood up. He walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on the handle. He turned. Mom, yes. I'm sorry. I know you are, Theodore. I love you. Eleanor's face did not move. I know you do, Theodore. That's what makes this the worst day of my life. He walked out. The Lexus drove away. Eleanor stood in the middle of the diner. She did not move. She did not breathe. Maggie crossed the room slowly. Maggie put her arms around her. Eleanor did not collapse. She did not weep. She simply stood there, in the arms of a woman who had also been thrown away by her own child, and she let the silence hold her. After a long time, she whispered, Maggie. Yes, Elle. I think more than the weather is coming. Yes, Elle. Promise me something. Anything. When it gets here, whatever it is. We open the doors, we let them in, whoever they are. We let them in, Maggie said, every single one of them. Nathan came that night as he had promised. He came after dark on foot, having parked his rental car a half-mile down the road. He wore a black coat. He looked like a man who had been arguing with his own conscience for many years and had finally lost. He knocked. Eleanor opened the door. He stepped inside. He did not sit. He held out a manila envelope. Mrs. Whitmore, Caroline has a copy of her father's will. She has been showing it to her lawyers. She has been telling them it is the only one. It is not the only one. What do you mean? There is another copy, a signed and dated copy that supersedes the one she has. Walter kept it. I found it 3 weeks after he died, in a safe deposit box in Bozeman that Caroline did not know existed. Why are you giving it to me? Nathan's voice was very quiet. Because my grandfather Emmett and Walter were brothers in everything but blood, and because I have read this will. Walter named you, by name, by full name, by your maiden name even, Eleanor Margaret Whitmore, formerly Eleanor Margaret Sutter, third-grade teacher at Cleveland Westside Elementary, 1962 to 1966. He left this property to you, outright. There is no probate question. There is no fraud. The diner is yours. Eleanor took the envelope with hands that did not feel like her own. Nathan stood in front of her for a moment longer. Then, Mrs. Whitmore? Yes. Caroline grew up hating you. Her mother spent her life teaching her to hate you. I do not want to be the third generation of that kind of hate. Nathan? Yes, Ma'am. Thank you. He nodded. He turned to leave. At the door, he paused. He looked back. There is a storm coming, Mrs. Whitmore. The forecasters are saying it could be the worst one in 30 years. I know. Caroline is going to drive up from Denver in it. She is stubborn. She does not believe in weather. If she comes to my door, Nathan, I will open it. He pressed his mouth into a thin line and nodded once and walked out into the dark. The storm arrived at 7:42 on the 23rd day. It did not knock. It did not warn. 1 minute the snow was falling soft and slow. The next minute the wind picked up the world and shook it. The neon sign rattled. The kitchen lights flickered once, then died. Eleanor was at the counter with a wooden spoon in her hand. Maggie was at the griddle. Both women froze. Maggie. Yes, Elle. The lights. I noticed. They are out. I noticed, Elle. A pause. Are we calm? We are calm. Are we, though? We are working on it. Eleanor put the spoon down. Because Walter had built a bunker. Because Walter had spent 40 years filling it. Because Walter had not done that for a sunny afternoon in May. Maggie, it is time. She did not need to say more. Maggie was already moving. They opened the trap door. Eleanor descended the stairs. She crossed to the generator. She read Walter's notes taped to the wall. Step 1. Open the fuel valve. Step 2. Pump the priming bulb 6 times. Slowly. Step 3. Pull the cord on the 3rd try, not the 1st. W. She pulled the cord. The generator coughed. Caught. The bunker came up in warm yellow light. Maggie exhaled. He thought of everything. Above them, a knock at the front door. Hard. Frantic. Already half frozen. Sheriff Declan Moore stood on the porch with snow caked into his eyebrows. His cruiser was sideways in the gravel. Lights flashing red and blue against the white. Mrs. Whitmore. Sheriff. The whole county's dark. I've got elderly folks on oxygen, babies, a pregnant woman whose husband is stranded outside Bozeman. I would not ask you, except, Sheriff. Yes, ma'am. Bring them all. He stared at her. Ma'am, bring them. Every last one. Walter built it for this. The sheriff stared one more second. Then he tipped his hat. He turned. He ran. Within 2 hours, the Ridgeway diner was no longer empty. It was full. 38 people, then 40, then 43. Mrs. Delgado, 81 years old, wrapped in a quilt her mother had made in 1962. The Martinez family with 3 children, the youngest a 4-month-old baby boy named Mateo, a pregnant woman named Sarah Wexford, 29, 8 months along, Eddie the plumber, Hattie the librarian, old men, young families, strangers, all frozen, all looking at the 70-year-old woman in the apron with the same exact expression on every face. Please tell us we are safe now, and Eleanor. Eleanor had been a 3rd-grade teacher for 42 years. Eleanor knew what to do. She moved, her hip hurt, her knee hurt. She did not stop. She organised the bunker into stations, sleeping area along the east wall, medical area near the desk, food prep near the stairs, children's corner near the generator vent because the generator vent was warmest. Maggie became, in the span of 1 hour, the bunker's medical officer. She checked Mrs. Delgado's blood pressure with a cuff she found in the medical supplies. She listened to baby Mateo's chest with a stethoscope. She frowned. She pressed a warm rice pack against the baby's lungs until the wheezing eased. Eleanor knelt, painfully, beside the children. She told them stories. She told them about a teacher who had once known a small boy who could not read, about staying after school every Tuesday, about the day the boy moved away, about what he had done with his life 60 years later. She told them they were safe. The children listened. A child who is being read to does not cry. At 3:47 in the morning, Sheriff Moore's radio crackled to life. The voice on the other end was breaking up. Declan, we got 2 cars, both stuck on the old highway, both heading for the diner, black Cadillac, female driver, silver Lexus, male driver, both broke down within a half-mile of each other, neither one is moving. Eleanor's hands stopped. The world stopped. She rose, slowly, painfully. Sheriff. Mrs. Whitmore. Both cars. Yes, ma'am. Both. Yes. She closed her eyes. She did not need to ask whose Lexus. She knew, the way a mother always knows. Maggie crossed the bunker in 3 long strides. Eleanor. No. Maggie. You're not going out there. You're 70 years old. The wind chill is -34. You will die. My son. Your son made his choice. And then who reads the children's stories? Who runs the bunker? Who stays? Eleanor opened her mouth. She closed it. Maggie was right. Maggie was right. Sheriff Moore stepped between them. I'm going. Emmett is here. Nathan is here. 3 of us. We have done storms before. We will find them. Both. But you stay and keep these 40 people alive. Eleanor stood there, hands shaking. Sheriff. Yes, ma'am. Bring them home. I will. Both. Both, Mrs. Whitmore. The 3 men roped themselves together, the way Walter had written in his manual. In a true whiteout, 3 men move as 1 or 3 men do not move at all. Emmett stopped at the door. He looked back at Eleanor. He did not say anything. He just nodded once, the way a man nods when he is going somewhere he might not come back from. The 3 of them went up the stairs. The door at the top thudded closed. Silence. The kind of silence a room makes when 40 people are listening to one door close. Eleanor walked back to the children. She knelt down. Her hips screamed. She picked up the book. She opened it. She kept reading. A teacher's voice does not shake in front of children. It cannot. 2 hours. 2 hours. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the bunker held its breath. Maggie kept moving. She would not sit down. She checked Sarah Wexford. She checked the old man on the IV. She checked the baby. She checked the children. Eleanor read 3 books. Then she made up a story. The story was about a man who built a house under the ground and filled it with everything anyone would ever need. The story was about how sometimes, when the world is at its worst, the universe takes the smallest thing you ever did and uses it to save people you have never even met. Baby Mateo fell asleep in his mother's arms. The mother started to cry. Eleanor placed her hand on the woman's wrist. You are all right now. The woman could not answer. She did not have to. At 5:14 in the morning, the door at the top of the bunker opened. Cold air rushed down. Snow came with it. Footsteps. 3 sets, then 4, 5. Sheriff Moore came down the stairs first, half carrying a woman in a camel-coloured cashmere coat. Caroline Brennan Sterling was barely conscious. Her lips were blue. Behind him, Emmett. Supporting a tall man in a grey cashmere overcoat, Theo. Behind him, Nathan, alone, his face drawn. "Mum," Theo whispered. His face was the colour of paper, his teeth were chattering. "Theodore? I came to apologise, Mum. The people, the ones I owed, they came after me in Chicago. I just drove. I did not know where else to go. I came to ask you to forgive me, not for money. I swear to God, Mum, not for money." Eleanor's whole body went still. She crossed the bunker. She did not run to her son first. She went to Caroline. She knelt down beside the woman who had stood on her porch and called her a squatter, and she pulled off her own sweater, her warm wool sweater, and she wrapped it around Caroline's shoulders. She took Caroline's blue, half-frozen hands. She rubbed them between her own. "Maggie. Already on it. Hot pack, warm fluids, IV if she needs it. Already, Elle." The bunker, 40 people who 5 minutes ago had been silent and frightened, moved like a single machine. Hattie brought blankets. Eddie brought a thermos. Mrs. Delgado, 81 years old and barely 4'10", knelt down beside the cot with her quilt and tucked it around the unconscious woman as if she were her own daughter. Only after Caroline was breathing under 5 blankets and Maggie nodded that her vitals were stabilising, only then did Eleanor turn to her son. Theo was sitting on the floor. Emmett had eased him down against the wall. He was crying. Not the controlled tears of the day he had sat in her diner. These were the other tears, the ones a man cries when he has just understood, at 47 years old, that he is not the man he thought he was. He could not look at her. Eleanor knelt in front of him. She placed both her hands on either side of her son's face. She made him look at her. "Theodore? Mom, you're alive. Mom, you're alive. You're here. Do you hear me? Mum, I'm so sorry, Mum, I am so. I know." She held her son's face. She pressed her forehead against his. She did not cry. She had cried too many tears already this lifetime. She just held him, the way she had held him in 1977 when he was a baby with colic. Because that was what mothers did, and that was what she had always been. After a long time, Theo whispered, "Mum, I'm going to go to the police. After this. I'm going to tell them everything, about the debt, about what I tried to do to you." "Yes, Theodore, you are. And whatever happens to me, happens to me. Yes. Will you wait for me when it is over?" Eleanor closed her eyes. She thought about Harold, about what Harold would have said. When she answered carefully. "Theodore, I am your mother. I will love you for the rest of my life. That is not a question. But I cannot be your bank, and I cannot be your way out. So, yes, when you have served your time, when you have done the work, when you have become the man your father raised, I will be waiting at the door of this diner with a pot of coffee, not before." He nodded. He cried harder. She held him. Caroline Brennan Sterling woke at 10:32 the next morning. The storm was still going outside, but the worst of it had passed. Eleanor was sitting in a folding chair beside her cot, asleep. Caroline opened her eyes. She blinked. She saw the ceiling of the bunker. She saw the people. She saw Eleanor, asleep in the chair, wearing only a thin white tank top, because Eleanor had given Caroline her sweater. Caroline began to cry, silently, the way a woman cries when she has just understood in one terrible flash who she has been her entire life. Eleanor stirred. She woke. Their eyes met. "Mrs. Whitmore." "Hello, Caroline. Why? Why what? Why did you tell them to bring me here?" "Because you needed to be brought. After everything I said to you, Caroline. After what my mother said about you for 40 years, Caroline." The young woman went silent. Eleanor leaned forward. She took Caroline's hand, the hand that had, 10 days ago, pointed a perfectly manicured finger at her in the gravel parking lot. "Your father would have brought you, so I brought you. That is the whole of it." Caroline closed her eyes. She wept, when she could speak again. "I am dropping the lawsuit, Mrs. Whitmore. I know you are. I am calling my lawyer this morning. "I know." Eleanor squeezed her hand once and then released it. The two women sat together in the bunker for a long time without speaking. Outside, the wind began, finally, to ease. 3 weeks after the storm, Eleanor found the secret drawer in Walter's desk. She had been organising his papers. She was alone in the bunker. The afternoon light was coming down through the small reinforced window high in the wall, falling in a gold rectangle across the concrete floor. She pulled out the bottom drawer. She found that the drawer was shorter than the others. She tapped the back of it. Hollow. She found the catch. She opened it. Inside was a leather-bound ledger. Eleanor opened it. Page after page, names, dates, amounts. She read for 2 hours. When she was finished, she sat in Walter's chair and she did not move for a long time. Walter Brennan, in the 44 years he had owned and operated the Ridgeway diner, had quietly given away $180,000 of his own money. To children whose families could not afford school clothes, to children whose mothers could not afford their inhalers, to children who needed glasses, to children who needed dental work, to one young girl in 2011 who had needed help with cancer treatment, to one boy in 2017 whose family had been about to lose their house. 29 children in total, by name, by Briarwood County, by need. Every single check, every single one of them, was signed at the bottom of the memo line with the same words, "In honour of Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore, who taught me I was worth saving." Eleanor read every entry. She did not weep until the last one. The last entry was dated January 14th, 2022, 2 months before Walter died. It was for $2,400. It was made out to a family in Briarwood whose third-grade son had a learning disability and whose parents could not afford the specialist. The memo line read, "In honour of Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore," because every Walter deserves a Mrs. Whitmore. Eleanor put her face in her hands. She wept the way a woman weeps when she has finally understood, at 70 years old, that her life had been twice as large as she had ever known. In the back of the drawer, underneath the ledger, she found one last thing. A sealed envelope, her name on it, in Walter's handwriting. She opened it. She read, "Mrs. Whitmore. If you are reading this, then somehow, against everything I dared believe, you have walked back into my life. I am sorry that I never had the courage to walk into yours. I tried. I came close. I lost my nerve every time. The truth is, I was afraid. I was afraid that the woman who had once been the kindest thing in my life had grown old, or had forgotten me, or had become someone different from the woman in my memory, and I could not bear to lose the only good thing I had carried out of childhood. So I built a building instead. I built it for you. Every nail, every wall, every shelf, every can on every shelf. I built it for the day, if it ever came, when you would walk through the door even if I was already gone. You were the difference, Mrs. Whitmore. You did not know it. That is what makes it true. The kindness we give to children when nobody is watching is the kindness that makes the world. It does not need our names on it. It only needs to have been given. Thank you. Welcome home. Walter." Eleanor folded the letter carefully. She placed it back inside the envelope. She placed the envelope back inside the drawer. She closed the drawer. She sat for a long time in the quiet bunker beneath her own diner. 6 months later, on a warm afternoon in May, the new neon sign above the door of the Ridgeway diner buzzed to life for the first time since 2009. The whole town came. Sheriff Moore brought his grandchildren. Doris brought a casserole. Opal brought 4 pies. Emmett brought his cap, which he held against his chest the entire afternoon. Carolyn brought a photographer from the Billings Gazette. Nathan brought his fiancée. Mrs. Delgado brought her cat. Theo was not there. Theo was in Chicago, serving 14 months for what he had done. But on a Sunday in May of the next year, Theo would step off a bus in Briarwood with 1 suitcase and the apron Opal had mailed to him. He would walk 4 miles east on the old highway. He would knock on a screen door. His mother would open it. She would hand him a rag and a fresh bucket of soapy water. He would wash dishes for $9 an hour. He would still be washing them 3 years later. Maggie ran the cash register. Maggie had decided 3 months earlier that she would not be returning to Phoenix. Maggie had decided she had a daughter named Eleanor now, a daughter who happened to be older than her. But stranger things had happened. The plaque above the door, brass and freshly polished, caught the late afternoon light. It read, "Ridgeway Diner. Established 1978 by Walter Brennan. Reopened 2025 by Eleanor Whitmore. the teacher who stayed after school in 1962. For a small boy nobody else stayed for. If you are reading this, you are welcome here. All of you. Always. That night, after everyone had gone home, after the dishes were done and the lights in the diner had been turned down low, Eleanor stepped out onto the front porch. The Montana sky was wide and full of stars. Maggie came out beside her. 2 old women, one quilt around their shoulders. The neon sign above their heads buzzed warm and red against the dark. After a long while, Maggie said, "Eleanor?" "Yes, Maggie. 8 months ago we had $5 each." "I know. And nowhere to go." "I know. And here we are." "Yes, Maggie." A pickup truck rolled into the gravel parking lot. A long-haul trucker climbed out stretching, his breath fogging in the cool spring air. He looked up at the neon sign. He smiled the way a man smiles when he's been driving too long and has finally found a warm place that knows it is warm. Eleanor stepped down from the porch. She walked toward the door. She turned the key in the lock. She held it open. She said in the same voice she had once used to call third graders in from recess on a cold November afternoon long ago, "Welcome to Ridgeway. Come in out of the cold." The trucker tipped his cap. He walked inside. The diner glowed, the plaque shone, the neon hummed. And in the small living quarters at the back of the kitchen, on the top shelf of a bookshelf made of cedar, a 60-year-old copy of The Old Man and the Sea sat where it had always sat, with a folded letter inside its pages, and the world went on, the way the world always does, around the quiet kindnesses we give to children when nobody's watching. The end.